demons and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where we explore the strange and the unexplained. I'm your host, Lon Strickler. Thanks for joining us. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy our content, please subscribe, like, and share our presentations. And also, please feel free to place any comments about the show. You have suggestions. It's much appreciated. Super Chat is active during the show, so please show your support for Phantoms and Monsters Radio. You can do that by clicking on the dollar icon underneath the chat. You can also support us by using the Buy Me a Coffee link or banner, and there's also a link in the description below. So your consideration is very much needed and appreciated. So tonight our guest is Jason Hewlett. He was a journalist, broadcaster, and podcaster with a degree in filmmaking and film studies. A lifelong interest in the paranormal led him to join Vancouver Paranormal Society in 2017, where he was a lead investigator and society director until 2020, when he and colleague Peter Renn launched the Canadian Paranormal Foundation. He is a writer, director, and co-creator of the award-winning paranormal reality series We Want to Believe, and narrator for the UFO Show, both of which are on the Paranormal Network. In 2020, Jason and Peter Renn co-authored the best-selling book, I Want to Believe, One Man's Journey into the Paranormal, which highlights Peter's career as a paranormal investigator. And in 2021, the follow-up book, I Want to Believe, An Investigator's Archive. And then a third book, the most recent, Dying Light, an investigation into near-death experiences, which came out in June of this year. So, Jason, thanks for coming on tonight.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Lon. It's an honor to be here.
Well, yeah, we've never met, so it's always nice to meet somebody. And I appreciate you following us for the time you mentioned before. So, yeah, great to meet you.
It's great. It's great to meet you too. Yeah, I've been excited about this all week, actually.
So, I did read the description and a bit about you. What are you actually doing now? You're doing some presentation. You just wrote a book, and we're going to talk about that because I know we've got people who are interested in near-death experiences. So, but just give us a thumbnail what you've been doing.
Well, yeah, I've been interested in the paranormal for forever, like we were talking about before, like most people are, started interest as a child, but it's really only in the last few years that I've kind of really started doing this. I don't want to say professionally, because it just seems like an odd phrasing to use for something in this kind of line of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm focusing primarily on, I manage the Paranormal Network for Joe Blow Media Incorporated. So I'm the guy that show runs all the programming on there. And we've got about 5 or 6 ongoing series that cover everything from UFOs to Bigfoot to hauntings. Myself and Peter do a couple shows, Hunting the Haunted, where we kind of dissect different well-known hauntings and ghost stories. And then we have our documentary series, We Want to Believe. So that's kind of one side of things. And then the other side of it is doing the authorship. So we just finished the book Dying Light, and we're working on another book for Beyond the Fray Publishing. Like, our books have been published through Beyond the Fray with G. Michael Hopf and Shannon LeGros. But we're also, I'm a paranormal investigator, and that's kind of where all this really started. I co-founded the Canadian Paranormal Foundation, and we go out and investigate hauntings, residential hauntings, commercial hauntings, historic sites. We get a bit into Bigfoot hunting more for our own entertainment and interest than anything else, and do sky watching and things like that. So Yeah, that's my day. Like every day is just doing this, kind of like yourself with the blog, right? Collect it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's an eclectic thing. So much of the paranormal is connected now, and it's interesting all the things you can come up with. But yeah, exactly.
It
So,
is, and I mean that's why we jump from like a little bit of everything. It feels like right now, like just kind of fingers in a whole bunch of different pots, just seeing what comes out of each and every one of them. So I
mhm.
feel kind of opportunistic doing it, but at the same time, it's just the way it's kind of work out. This wasn't by design; it just sort of happened.
So you wrote this book, Dying Light. Tell us a bit about it. I mean, first of all, have you had a near-death experience yourself?
Well, and that's the funny thing. I personally haven't, although I had an experience that mirrored something in the book. Peter had a near death experience when he had a liver transplant.
Mhm.
He had flatlined basically. But we were interviewing people for our second book, the Investigator's Archive, and one of the stories in there. We were interviewing Angela Artuso, who's a paranormal investigator out of New York City, and she was kind of telling her life story. And she had this near death experience that was so different than near death experiences we'd heard about before. That wasn't the typical tunnel of light and shadowy figure going over, into another side of the universe. Hers was different. It was a bit frightening, but it was really profound. And when we kind of finished the interview with her, I called Peter up, right away, because we were doing it over Zoom because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and said we got to write a book about this, like about near death experiences, because this story is great. It wouldn't fit into this other book, so let's go out and kind of just talk to different people who had near death experiences and talk to kind of neuroscientists and grief counselors and a whole range of people, and put it in this book. And we pitched it to Beyond the Fray, and they liked the idea, and it just sort of rolled from there, actually.
Mm, interesting. So, tell us a bit about some of the experiences that you've written about.
Well, one of them, Angela's, was really interesting, and it's a chapter in there called The Man in Black. And her story, she works at a hospital, and she was a passenger in the car on the way to work and was T-boned.
Mm,
And the truck that hit her, like, it shattered the window in the passenger side. She was wearing a scarf because it was February. The scarf got tangled up in the grill of the truck as it pulled across and started strangling her.
mm,
Somehow that came loose. The vehicle spun around. The driver was fine, so they got out to get help. And Angela's laying there, just a broken, bloody mess, really. And she knew that if she kind of closed her eyes, that would probably be it. But like, she kind of figured, I'm not going to make it. And next, she kind of looks over in the driver's seat, and there's a man sitting there staring straight ahead, wearing all black, white porcelain skin, black hair, eyes black, like, the black-eyed children phenomenon, basically. And
mhm.
he's just sitting there, not looking at her, staring straight ahead. And she tries communicating with him, and he responds, but not like telepathically, how it usually goes in near-death experiences. They're actually talking to each other, and the man's basically telling her, you're going to be fine. Don't worry, you're going to get out of here. And he just keeps repeating this to her. And as the paramedics come and the fire emergency responders, and they cut her out of the vehicle like the jaws of life, and they load her into the ambulance, and the man in black's there with her, holding her hand at this point, telling her everything's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. They drive to the hospital, pull her out to take her into surgery. And she's like, where's this guy? Where's the man that was with me? As she's getting hauled off. And they're like, you were the only one in the ambulance. It was you and the paramedics. You were the only ones there. And that's basically her story. So it was just so unique and so unlike anything else that we had heard, that I'd heard, just as someone with an interest in near-death experiences.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the one that kicked it all off, really. Other ones in there fit more into the traditional tunnel of light, cloudy plain area, some figure waiting for them on the other side, that kind of thing. But that was the most unique story that we gathered.
I've especially those instances that are similar to what you mentioned earlier, where people are in an accident or something and they're clinging to life, and somebody comes to them and is there holding their hand or communicating with them, telling them that everything's going to be all right. I've heard so many of those. There was one instance that I remember, and this was out in California, and I don't remember the exact location, but there was there was a automobile accident, and the woman was in the car, and this person came to her. This other woman came to her dressed in a paramedic's outfit, and she thought it was actually the paramedic, and she was talking to her, but she wasn't doing anything other than just talking to her. And after the fireman got there, got her out, got her in the ambulance, got her to the hospital, she was asking about the paramedic, and it turned out it was the paramedic that was in a helicopter coming to the accident and crashed, and the woman died.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
Yeah, that that was one of the most amazing ones I've heard. But I heard another one very similar to that too. So yeah, I mean, you hear all kinds of crazy stories, but that one's kind of stuck with me.
Well, and that would, because that's almost like it's one part near-death experience, one part ghost story. You know what I mean? That if something that happened immediately, like just like minutes earlier, like that's crazy, but fascinating.
Yeah, you got to wonder if the paramedic actually even knew she was dead, and just came to this woman's aid. Though the act, that from what I remember, is the helicopter accident was like 4 or 5 miles away from the actual accident. And yeah, she was there. And when she described it to the people in the hospital, they were stunned because it was exactly the description of the woman who had died in the crash, the helicopter crash.
That's amazing. It's almost like an intelligent haunting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
absolutely. I wonder if the paramedic knew they were dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Maybe she didn't even know she had died. I do spirit rescue work, and occasionally, you will go into a situation where you're trying to help a client, and it seems the earthbound doesn't even really know they're dead. You try to communicate, but the way they react and the way they act, it's just like, well, they don't even know they're dead. They're here, but they don't even know they died. So yeah,
that's a common question we ask when we do our investigations with Canadian Paranormal too, is do you know that you've died? Like, what year is it right now? Right. And sometimes you get that it's 100 years in the past kind of thing. It's like, well, no, it's actually 2020 or 2021, not 1920 or 1921. Right. I think a lot of spirits don't realize what's happened to them.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
One of the theories we've come up across. It's all speculation, but
Yeah. It's I mean, you hear of all kinds of reasons why you think they believe they're here. They're there, but they know they're dead. They're there by choice because they had unfinished business, or they're there to protect one of the living, or they just don't know they're dead. So you hear all kinds of stories. But if you're into like spirit rescue and if you do have some type of intuitive connection or psychic connection with them, you can get a lot of different stories or interpretation of what they think is going on, and quite frankly, a lot of them don't even want to move on. It's it's all it's all free will. If they don't want to move, they don't move.
No, and I mean we've encountered that as well, right?
Yeah.
In certain cases, some of them it is simply like that recording, like almost like the stone tape theory is. They're just spirits that an event has been more recorded than anything else. But when it seems intelligent, or even like spirits that move around, we've had cases where the spirit has followed someone. Like someone was a grief counselor and counseling, and it was the spirit of someone who'd committed suicide. And the person who was the counselor was counseling the loved one left behind, but the spirit didn't want to leave that person who they loved, even though they'd killed themselves. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then followed the counselor home because they felt sort of a connection to the counselor.
Yeah.
Which I find just very interesting. So it's like they're still being people.
Right.
Right. They're just not here.
Yeah, I mean, some of the more interesting stories that I've heard or have run across while doing work are in nursing homes, particularly even hospitals. But people who are in a nursing home are maybe they're at that point where they're getting near to death. They describe all kinds of weird stuff. I mean, not only the relatives who had passed on, but a lot of different things. And I had one woman tell me at one point. She said there's at least 20 people that come in here anytime during the day or night. I know they're not alive, but they just come in here. And I asked her, I said, well, have you ever had this ability to see them before? And she just didn't. And she said, no, all of a sudden I'm starting to see all these people. And she said, I think I'm going to be dying soon. That's just the way I feel. Even though she wasn't really sick, she was just in this nursing home. And honestly, she didn't last but a couple of weeks longer. She just died from natural causes.
That must be maybe as you get closer to the end, right? It's like when you're young and a kid like my son, and especially in the first few years of his life, would see stuff all the time and talk about, the thing in the walls at our house, or the thing that was living downstairs that would always bug the dog. And he's gotten older, he's seen less and less, less stuff. He's 11 now. Right. And I always wonder if towards the end, it's kind of the same thing. You're just sort of, your mind just lets you kind of get back in tune with what's going on around you.
Yeah.
With the paranormal. I mean, my mom, before she passed away, was seeing stuff in her house all the time, and especially in the last few weeks of her life, right? Like it was there all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. I've run across a lot of different things, but and I've done a lot of work with kids, and it's interesting some of the things they come up with, because when you do talk to them, they're seeing something.
Oh yeah.
They're realizing something. I mean, they're so young, they haven't been given the word that they're not really supposed to be seeing this stuff, but they're not compromised. And it's really bizarre.
I can remember my kid, he was maybe one, and one night he was crying. So I went in to take a look at him, and he was standing up in his crib and just pointing like into the corner of the room and crying and just going like this. Like there was something in that corner of the room that he saw, and I looked and I couldn't see anything. It was just dark, but I thought that was kind of fascinating too. I think it's just a natural part of our experience. We just haven't figured it out yet. And it freaks people out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. James West has asked, what's the most common thing that you hear from those who have had a near-death experience?
The most common?
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting is everyone who's had one, at least that we interviewed for the book, is that it was a positive experience.
Oh, really?
I know that there's people who've had negative experiences, and we might write a second book focusing on that, but all the people we interviewed for the book came back with a renewed vigor for life. They saw the world very differently. They felt more at peace with the concept of death. All of them were like, yep, sign, when it happens, I'm ready to go. And they all sort of saw that the world, that the society we're in, was something that we created, and they didn't feel that it was the reality of life. They thought life was a lot more spiritual, a lot more about love and togetherness, and just found it very positive. So that was I thought really, really interesting. It was uplifting to write a book about death and kind of come out of it with that general message, I thought, James.
Vincent wants to know, do you think paranormal investigators are more likely to experience things at their home?
Everyone that I've been investigating with has had stuff. I have stuff happening in my home. I had stuff last night.
Yeah, me too. I mean,
and every home I've lived in, I've had stuff happen, even if it was a brand new build. So I know my colleague Peter has stuff happen in his homes. Other people on the team have had it happen. I think we're just maybe, like yourself, Lon, you're just in tune a bit more because you're open to the idea, so you're not dismissing something as just it's out of the corner of my eye, whatever.
Yeah.
But even stuff that's been so on the nose, like where you can't dismiss it as something else, like, yeah, I think it comes with the territory.
Well, I'm an intuitive, so I kind of drawn to that stuff, maybe being a beacon, and the energy is drawn to me, and maybe tag along if I'm on a case or something and comes. I try to avoid that as much as possible. It can be a problem at some point, but yeah, it does happen. And it's interesting, when I started doing spirit rescue, I started getting involved with helping people. Most of our cases were actual people who were doing paranormal investigations.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I honestly, I'd say 70% or more were paranormal investigators that were dragging stuff home with them.
Well, and we always call it the paranormal hangover, where the next day you're just completely destroyed, and some people think it's maybe because something followed you home, or they just bled your energy dry, or maybe you just stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning and you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But and we've had people say that they thought something's followed them home, or yeah, or followed us from my home to an investigation, that kind of thing. I think it's just kind of part of being an investigator, really. But I think it's around us all the time, anyways, no matter where you are.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are times when I'll be at that point where and it's very rare now as opposed to what it used to be, but I can be laying down and getting ready to go to sleep, and you're almost at that point where you're between sleep and being awake, and it's like occasionally I start seeing faces like in a window or something trying to get my attention. Uh, and they're trying to get my attention. They're just trying to get me to pay attention to them. They always have something to say to you. It seems, and I try to ignore that. I've gotten better at ignoring it. But unfortunately, some people just are not good enough to ignore it, or not able to ignore it. But no, I've heard all kinds of stories from people who are beacons. It turns into be a lot of problems, and a lot of hauntings that I've been involved with are people who are beacons who have abilities, but their spirit energy is drawn to them, and it's just a matter of getting them to realize what's going on and to kind of learn how to protect themselves and how to ignore it for the most part, because some people, it just drives some people crazy.
Oh yeah, no, it's something you do have to learn to control. I mean, we have a case, we're fortunate that we keep being able to go back. She keeps letting us into her house where this activity is going on, and she doesn't want to move. So it's stuff that we've told her, like, you need to, you have to be in control of this situation. It's your house. So if you don't want to move and you don't want to try to get someone to kick it out of the house, you got to figure out how to coexist with it. You know what I mean? And lay the ground rules down. You can't scare my kids anymore. You can't do this. Like, stop closing doors in front of our faces, right? Like, but you got to be firm, like you would be with a child or some neighbor that was bothering you, basically. And then I know for myself, I try to ground frequently, like, once or twice a week, do grounding exercises, just so I don't feel all just pulled in a bazillion different places at once and see stuff all the time out of the corner of my eyes.
Well, for someone who does what we do, I think that's got to be done all the time.
Yeah.
And it's good that you do that. If I get into a situation, I try to protect myself in particular for the situation, but just being a homer, I do try to ground myself. And I think that's a prerequisite for anybody that's involved with this.
Oh yeah. Big time. Big time.
Vincent wanted to know, have you heard of extraterrestrials in near-death experiences?
That was something that we did touch on just a little bit in the book. Because I know it's something that people talk a lot about, extraterrestrials being there. And even because the experiences are almost so similar, like in terms of like some reports of alien abductions and then some reports of near-death experiences. But I didn't get too far. We didn't get too far into it, just because we suddenly had so much material that we sort of saw the one direction the book was kind of going. So I think I'd like to, if we write a second book, focus more on some of the people that didn't have the good experiences, and then touch more on the alien experience that goes along with it. I mean,
right.
And I think it's interesting how extraterrestrials, like, they don't just come up in NDE, they come up in Bigfoot sightings and so much other paranormal experiences and locations. Like, we have a place not far from here where we go squatch hunting, where there's also UFOs seen quite a bit, right? Like, it's interesting how the extraterrestrial theme kind of ties into so much within the paranormal field.
Yeah, I think more investigators are starting to realize that too. It does seem that when you get involved with a case, that invariably something else pops its ugly head up there. I mean, you got spirit activity or UFO activity, even in extraterrestrial activity involved with it. If you're doing like a squatch case or some other cryptid case, there always seems to be something else behind it.
Oh yeah. We did some episodes. We did a big series of Bigfoot hunt episodes for We Want to Believe a couple of years ago, and we went out to this location, and we were doing all the stuff for squatching. You know what I mean? Like the baby crying, and we brought a Aboriginal men with us who could do the prayers and the tree knocks and everything. But because we're ghost hunters, we figure, well, we've got a spirit box. Why don't we just break it out and see what happens, right? So we walked off. As soon as we turned that thing on, before we even asked a question, this voice came through, "Help me." And we started doing lines of questioning. We got a name, named Robert, and just continuous requests for help me. So we decided we wanted to go back later and try to do some research, see maybe if something happened to a guy named Robert in this area, and how that tied into things. And we didn't really get much, but on the drive back down, we saw a roadside marker for a gentleman named Robert Backer, who had died only a few kilometers down the road in an accident from where we were squatching. And so that just took on a completely different direction. And it just, I don't know. It's interesting how we got those parallels. Well, essentially trying to just do Bigfoot hunting.
So what kind of experience have you had in any of your investigations?
We've had like a variety of them. Like a lot of the cases are like very typical, like not much actually really happens
Right.
when you go looking. But then we've had certain spots that we're kind of finding to be hot spots. Like we have one place called Bailey House, which is about an hour and a half from where we live, and it's a historical home that's now open to the public. And stuff has been reported there for years. And we've had toys. Hey, Carter, toys come off the shelf. I've been sworn at by spirits in that house, which I think is really interesting. And downstairs in the cellar, we set up a laser grid system. So I don't know if you've used those, Lon, where it's kind of basically it does.
I've seen them.
Like. Yeah. We had that, and the theory is that something will cut in front of it, that even if they're not physically there. And sure enough, like we turned this laser grid on, and you could see like it was like a silhouette, a shadow, like part of a person standing there. Turned on the light, nothing obstructing the laser grid that could have caused that. Turned it off. It's still there, and we did this 3 or 4 times. Then slowly, you could almost just see the shadow, almost like it walked away. We actually filmed that for We Want to Believe and got that on one of the episodes. What was called the Dollhouse, which I thought was quite interesting. This one location, I can't give her name. It's the person where we've been able to go back repeatedly. Like we've had bangs. It's a 3-story home. We've had whatever is in there having us running up and down all 3 stories, because we'd be in the basement, ask for something, and through our digital recorders, you could hear like, "Give us a knock." And suddenly on the 3rd floor, you could hear like 2 knocks like that. So we go upstairs. And when we're upstairs, something bangs on the main level, that kind of activity. And this is a spirit. This woman's lived in this house for 4 or 5 years. It's a spirit that's been there as long as she's been there. And she's had, like, when she moved in, like Tupperware bins of clothes that were put downstairs suddenly materialize on the main level. Like they've just sort of gone up a level and over. So it's that kind of activity, which is, it's one of the most active places we've been, especially in terms of knocks and movement and just, personal experiences. So we get a lot of things like that. We've been lucky. There's a ghost town here in British Columbia named Barkerville. It's from the Gold Rush area, that we had access to the whole town for a weekend. And we had cameras set up where we've actually picked up apparitions on film, like with motion sensor cameras coming through a door, which I wish I could show you that. I don't have the picture in front of me. Unfortunately, you got to take my word for it. But that was, rare to get those kind of pictures. So I guess really nothing out of the ordinary in this field, but stuff that for us is pretty exciting, because as you know, Lon, you can spend a lot of time waiting to get even just a good EVP. In the last few years, we've noticed activity picking up. I don't know what the reasoning is. We've been getting a lot more active cases, a lot more cases involving electronics going off. It's hard to explain. Like we've had a run in the last 6 months where there's almost every time we've gone out, we've had a number of things going off, motion sensors going off, cameras picking things up. In a child's room, we had a baby Yoda that in order to activate it, you have to tap it on the head, and it just started responding to us moving on its own to our questions. "Can you move, please?" And the baby Yoda starts just turning. "Can you stop?" And it would stop. "Okay, could you maybe move a little bit more?" And, it was responding that way. So I don't know why, but things have really ramped up in the last few years. I've been doing this for 18 years, and it's been, I say, really in the last couple that things have really become interesting from our perspective.
Yeah, I think overall, for most investigators who've been doing this a while, things have gotten a little more hairier the last couple of years.
That's a good way to put it. Is hairier.
Yeah. It's just that there's so much different stuff that's showing up. That's just unexplained. I mean, in my instance, it's been these pale crawler humanoids, or what the hell they're called. People call them, and they just seem to show up in all kinds of different places. But even the cryptids themselves are kind of morphing into something else. People have talked about dogmen or upright canines, and we're starting to get more of these things that look like hyena, looking hyena-like, especially here in Pennsylvania. We're actually looking at 5 cases in Pennsylvania right now. So it's that, for whatever reason, that's been picking up. But it's been pretty wild. But you're right. All in all, the activity has seemed to increase, and I can't say I'm really surprised. I think more people are looking around and seeing things, and not as reluctant to come forward with it. I don't know if that's what's been going on with you, but I think people are more open to it.
I agree. Like I think part of it is because we were forced to slow down for a while, so people were starting to pay more attention to what was going on around them, and I think that made a difference. And I think there's just this energy now in general. I think maybe because people are a little more anxious and ramped up and edgy, you know what I mean? That energy is going out there. Because I think I'd almost say, like, even though I've never felt threatened on any recent investigations, everything just seems more aggressive. Like something is really wanting to make contact in some way. Like I said, that the Baby Yoda thing in the house where we're being run around different floors. Like I've like I said, I've been doing this 18 years. I hadn't had anything like that for years on so many cases. It was all just stuff. You get an EVP, you'd see a shadow, maybe you'd get a good picture, but it just seems like things are just becoming more aggressive, for lack of a better term.
Well, that's just it. I mean, is the energy overall ramping up to the point where, are these something that's from another level, from another plane, another existence that's coming in, or somehow and making itself known as opposed to before? I suppose that's possible, but it does seem that we are really getting a lot of weird, just like with this Chicago Mothman stuff we've been working on for all these years. I mean, that gets weirder and weirder as we go on. I mean, we just get more and more evidence that these things just are not here all the time. They're coming in for another reality, either another dimension, and it's exciting. It's something new to us, but I mean, wow, it's like mind blowing sometimes. And as long as people keep reporting, we're going to look into it. But of course, this is like everything else. We're just getting more and more.
And that's what we've been noticing too, just in terms of haunting cases. We've had a run where we've had a really good run, not just like we're just getting called out to people's homes, and things just kind of seem to be happening. And it makes you wonder if it's building to something, right? Like, like with even the Chicago Mothman, or like you say, the more dogmen sightings. What is the end game here?
Well, that's just it. I mean, is there an end game? I mean, people can speculate about all this stuff as much as they want, but unless we get some evidence or some indication of what may be going on or why it's happening, it's all a guess. But I mean, you got to wonder, is there something that's going to break loose at some point?
Do you think part of it is the technology we have, Lon, where we can record things easier? Like, you know what I mean? Like we can break out a phone and shoot a picture of it. So before it was like, I saw this Mothman or whatever it was, and then you had to tell it to somebody, and then the person would be like, yeah, you're full of shit. And then that would be, you know what I mean? That would be kind of it. But now you can show a video of it, or send you stuff to people like yourselves, right?
Well, unfortunately, in our case with Chicago, I mean, we're not getting much video evidence or photographic evidence because the sightings are fleeting for the most part. It seems certain people can see it, even if they're in a crowd. Are these things able to distinguish what sees them or who sees them? It's a lot of different variables that you kind of work around, but I mean, it is an enigma, even though we think we're getting more and more information as we go. But I guess it's like that with everything. Um, I mean, you're up in British Columbia. You're in a Bigfoot area. People talk about Bigfoot. We're getting more. And Dave Scott even told me about this the other day, that they're getting more dogman, upright canine type sightings up in that area as well. So, why is that happening? And of course, I do believe that Bigfoot in some locations is an indigenous being, just like up there in the Pacific Northwest and maybe down in Florida and such. But I think there's a possibility that many of these cryptids are interdimensional.
There's even a strong belief among our local indigenous tribes that it's more of a paranormal being
Yeah.
than a physical being, right? Like a friend I know named Chris Bowes, who's an Aboriginal storyteller and artist. Like when we'd go squatching with him, he'd tell us tons of stories, and Bigfoot's just one of the many forest spirits that they believe in. I mean, they're big in our area. One of them is the tricksters, which will actually try to lure you away, like out of your home or away from your campfire by sounding like someone outside. Like, I mean, like you're around the fire and then you hear like your friend, Billy, hey, saying, hey, Jason, come here. And they're out in the woods. You go out in the woods and the voice just keeps leading you further and further away till you're so far away they just grab you, take you over to the other side, and you're never seen again.
Right.
There's a strong kind of supernatural belief in that in the area where I am right now. And Bigfoot's just one of many, and they definitely believe that it's not physical. It's a interdimensional being of some kind.
It's interesting. And I've heard a lot of stories from a lot of indigenous folks, and then I've heard other stories from those who from the past, and most have told me, well, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or whatever you want to call them, is like a spiritual being to us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out something that was quite interesting. I thought was that there used to be a tribe in this area called the Susquehannock, and they and them, just like all the other tribes that were in this area at one point or another, they had the stories about these beings as being forest spirits and such. And I actually saw a picture of a shield that the Susquehannock used, and it was actually a drawing of a Bigfoot.
Really?
On the shield. And that's the first I'd ever seen that. Now, so from what I understand, maybe it was used like a talisman or some, like that for them as a protector or whatever. So I don't know. I mean,
I think it could be like, why wouldn't it? I guess,
Sure.
anything is possible, and just the same where like you have a lot of, the First Nations or indigenous peoples saying that they're connected to the sky people, like to aliens, and that those were their ancestors and they have a close relationship with them. So why not? Maybe Bigfoot isn't so much an interdimensional being as it's an extraterrestrial being. The people have been abducted by aliens and seen Bigfoot on spaceships, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's all. It makes, in a way, that makes almost the most sense.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people who have been involved with habituations or have had Bigfoot creatures on their property. And I've had a couple tell me, "Oh yeah, I saw one literally walk out of a craft one time." It's like, okay, well, it's not any different or more crazy than some of the other things I've heard about these things. So yeah, it's very possible. Vincent asked, have you looked into the Fey folk in hauntings and paranormal activity?
You know what, Vincent? Honestly, no, not too much. And that's just an area that's just sort of becoming interested in. I know there's a lot of people that sort of look into the Fae and that, but we don't have in Western Canada. It's kind of the newest part of Canada, so there's not a lot of strong connection to our roots, from the UK or Ireland or anything like that. So there's not even that much talk about it out where we are. Like it's very, and even in Canada, people here just don't want to talk about the paranormal that much still. Like people are becoming more open to it. And I think partly because it's just becoming popular with all the TV shows, etc., and documentaries. But they're not, there's just not this connection. Whereas if you go to Eastern Canada, it'd probably be like certain parts of the States where there's a lot more talk about the Fae, and they embrace it a lot more. Which makes me think I'm living on the wrong part of Canada. Yeah,
maybe I don't know.
So no, but it's an angle I'd really like to look into, because I know there is quite a correlation between the Fae and hauntings and the paranormal activity in general.
Right.
Yeah.
Jose Sanchez asked, but ETs are physical beings, not spirits, so it's a little strange that they would be associated with near-death experience phenomena, right? I don't know. What do you think about that?
It's, yeah, like that's what I figure, that they're, you know, a solid being, but it seems like the people that are having these near-death experiences, and especially the alien abduction ones, it's more of becomes this metaphysical experience, right? And
Yeah.
I haven't had one, so I don't know, but it's, you're going, because even people that have these near-death experiences, like the beings to them are so that they encounter on the other side seem very much like you and I. Like they're there, like it's you could physically reach out and touch them.
Yeah, they're ethereal. I mean, you know, they're just, exactly. I guess they are. You know, I had an encounter. I had a couple encounters, but I had an abduction, and when I went through that, the three tall beings that I had an encounter with they looked like they were real. I mean, they didn't look like they were some type of manifestation of some type of non-ethereal being.
Same. And I've even know people who have had encounters with, I think it was even Tim Weisberg with Midnight Society, Tim Weisberg, who mentioned he had an encounter with a ghost where he could actually physically touch it.
Is that right?
That's what he said. Yeah, like you could almost physically touch this spirit. And I mean, there's got to be something to that, because you do hear of people being like actually physically moved by spirits.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? I've even had an experience where I wasn't physically moved, but one was on, like I was opening a door in this tunnel system at an abandoned asylum. There's no way the door there's no pressure. You could grab it and it would just swing freely. I pulled it open, and something on the other side of that door grabbed it and pulled it closed with such force that I was pulled off my feet. And I'm 6'1", at the time, weighed like 200 pounds. So that's got to be some kind of manifestation of some kind of physical energy to do that. So I think all this stuff maybe can become physical or non-physical, non-corporeal, however you want it, almost at will.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely. I think you're right about that. You know, you hear about poltergeist cases, and even though for the most part they're just thought forms or tulpas for the most part, but they do seem to sometimes manifest into something more than non-corporeal. I mean, you know.
Oh yeah, like
they move things around. They touch people. They physically touch people, and yeah, I mean, absolutely.
People have been slapped by them. You know,
absolutely.
Slapped, scratches. Yeah. You know, they've had stuff thrown. They have chairs moved. Their beds lifted up. Like that's not. Even if you can't see it, there's something there that can move that, and that's like to me a physical form of energy of some kind.
It's some type of force that's got the ability to manifest into something possibly real. Have you ever, from Vince, have you ever experienced shadow beings, shadow creatures?
Oh yeah. No, I like, that's actually where I am right now, where I live. That's almost the majority of what we have going on here.
Is that right?
Shadow beings.
What are your thoughts on those?
It's to me, I mean, it's either a different form of a spirit, or it could be something like, I'm becoming a big believer in the whole multiverse theory idea.
Well, yeah.
You know, that it's something that to me, if it's anything's interdimensional, it's more of a shadow being. I think they're beings from somewhere else, because they're more than a ghost. They're not like a ghost. They don't seem to haunt, but they're there. But yeah, beyond that, I don't have too much thought on what it could be. I just know I've seen one, and it's just bizarre. Like it's bizarre. And it was the one I saw. I was sitting on the floor listening to music downstairs here, and I felt a presence behind me. So I turned and looked, and it was standing there, and it was a shadow, and it was tall and thin, almost like what a gray would look like, although featureless. It was just a shadow. We looked at each other, and then it turned and it ran, but not like it ran so fast. It was almost just like a blur, just disappearing. But I saw it turn and run, but it almost like it sped up in some way, like time sped up. And that was just quite alarming to see that. And it wasn't even, it was like, 9 o'clock at night, kind
Right.
of thing, basement. So,
The shadow beings that I've encountered while working with clients, they just seem to be feeders to me. I mean, they're just I don't think there's any connection to any real spirits or anything that once was living. I think there's a good possibility it may be extraterrestrial or some type of, you said multiverse, maybe some type of interdimensional being. But
yeah,
they seem to feed off a life force. They seem to gather energy from locations where there's a lot of dysfunction, death, illness, or something to that effect.
yeah.
And are hard as hell to get rid of.
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's, which I like the feeding idea, because they do seem to be associated with certain or people who are just in a bad place. I know when I had my experience, I was as a crime journalist, so I was seeing horrible stuff all the time, and it was just very depressed. So, and that's when I saw them the most. And when they kind of reappeared was around the time that my mother passed away. You know what I mean? And then that kind of thing. So I think definitely that I don't like that idea, but that's the thing that makes the most sense to me. Is they're not, but I don't see them as a ghost or anything like that. And I don't think they're anything that's lived on this earth ever.
No, I don't.
I don't like to throw the term demon around, because that's a loaded thing. I think it's even different from that phenomenon, if that phenomenon's even real. You know what I mean?
I think you're like me, because I believe evil is evil, and the term of demon, it's malevolent. People like to use a lot of different phrases for bad things, but
yeah,
I think the shadow beings come as close to that as anything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And in our field, we call them negative hauntings instead of like a demonic haunting. It's just negative energy. Like,
Exactly.
I think that's become more of a TV thing that's given the term demon prominent.
Yeah. I've just never liked that word. I mean, I've talked to people who do exorcisms or do deliverances and stuff, and that word demon comes up. It just kind of
I know.
Have you ever seen a demon? Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad you had, because I haven't. I've seen a lot of bad things, but something is it really a demon? I mean, what the hell's a demon? I mean,
No,
if it's
I know.
bad, it's bad.
Peter's the same. He's been doing this for almost 30 years all over the world, and he's not seen anything resembling anything demonic. And he even does work for an ordained exorcist. And out of the 10 years he's done work for them, as just an investigator, he's maybe had one case, maybe, where it could have been something that could have led to. So that's how he describes it. It's not like even a defined, oh yeah, there's possession here. You know what I mean? It's like maybe, possibly could bleed that way.
Exactly.
Potentially. Sort of thing. So.
William Nighthawk stated some of the dogman cryptid creatures are supernatural, more than likely demonic sources. So, I mean, that's his statement. So I don't know what you think about that. I like I said again, it can be supernatural. I mean, is it demonic? It's just bad. I think some of them are bad.
I think so. I think it's the same with like with ghosts that are actual spirits of people who've passed on. If you were a good person, your ghost's probably going to be a good ghost. If
absolutely, the traits do follow.
Right. Like that's just it. And I think, I agree with you that dogmen and those kind of cryptid creatures, if they're supernatural in origin, which I think something like a dogman would be, it would act more like just a supernatural being. It would neither be good nor bad. It would probably just do whatever. They do seem to be more vicious. Like the stories seem to center much more on negative encounters than anything else, whereas Bigfoot has had its mix of negative and positive. Dogmen's definitely been more almost like werewolf encounters. It's just some vicious animal in the woods kind of thing.
Yeah, they kind of stand their ground, and they don't seem like they're too fearful much. But I've heard people say that you hear about this mind speak phenomenon or infrasound, and like these things can kind of back people off. Maybe they do have a specific type of ability to do something that, as opposed, even people talk about it with Bigfoot. So maybe that's something they perfected to a bigger degree. I mean, we hear about that with these Mothman sightings in Chicago, where people are kind of talked into told to just back off, and have lost physical sense of their legs. I mean, they drop to the ground sometimes.
And
So,
there's lots of Bigfoot that have been reported that way, right?
sure.
Like, you know, and I mean, I've even been out in the woods at a cabin, in local cabin. And one moment everything's fine, you know, and we're in Bigfoot country. And the next moment, like it's like all the hairs go up on the back of my neck, and I get this feeling of dread. It's like, you know, I gotta go. I shouldn't be here anymore. It's time to leave. And I've had that happen twice. You know, more than 30 years I was going to this place. Like,
Yeah.
you just listen. It's like, okay, I'm going home. So I don't want to be here in case something shows up.
Moon Medicine Force asks, ever experienced a spirit hologram before, like a snapshot out of time?
Oh, yeah. Like we've got like a couple pictures that we've received or that we've taken at different locations have definitely looked like something that wasn't from the present time period. It looked like sort of, you know, clothing from like the 1800s, and this was in the gold rush place, which would make sense. That's when the gold rush would happen, as frontier times. Where in the picture it definitely looked like the clothing was not of our time period, but that'd be the closest to like sort of a hologram kind of thing. I haven't seen something kind of appear in front of me that's looked like that.
You know, it does seem to be places with a lot of energy or a lot of activity occurred at one point. It does seem to have a lot of glitchy phenomena where maybe we'll get flashbacks. I'm not necessarily saying it's a dimensional thing, but I think there's an energy that kind of crosses back and forth to where people can see certain things. I can't say I've ever experienced that, but I've talked to people who said they have.
Yeah, nor have I. Like the closest is at a place we investigate, a residential school. The same sort of event would repeat itself always at in the same location at like, you know, midnight. You could hear something running down the fire escape always to this corner of the building at midnight, and it just sounded like it was something replaying from the time that this facility was open, and someone was probably running down those stairs.
Yeah.
So, like,
well, that's like where I'm at. I mean, I'm not far from Gettysburg, and I've been on the battlefield most of my life, and most of that is just residual or just kind of energy that kind of pops back up at a certain time in a certain place. I mean, occasionally you do get something that's still out there, but not as much as you maybe at one point. But yeah, that's what people experience out there a lot.
Makes sense. It's a scene of intense trauma, right? With
Absolutely.
war. That's going to leave an impact and something in the ground.
Yeah. Yep. James West wants to know, have you ever had a personal experience with a dogman?
No. And, you know, like they're such a recent phenomenon up here. Like we've heard very little about them in my area. What we get here is it is more the traditional Bigfoot sighting. And then sometimes, like we say, these other forest spirit trickster things going on, but Bigfoot's the big thing here. I don't know I'd love to have a dogman experience. I don't know if I'd like to have it. I'd like to have, you know,
not me. I'm telling you, some of the stories I hear around here, no way in hell I want to have having a close encounter with one of those things. You know, if it's at a distance and I see it, okay, there it is. I see it now.
That'd be the extent of mine, and I'm in my truck and I'm ready to go, and it's like, yep, that's one, and I'm out.
I'm with you, brother. I mean, no way in hell I want to have any dealings with one of those things. I mean, like I said, it'd be nice to see, but that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
Jose asked, technology definitely has had an impact on the paranormal field. I guess to some degree it has. I mean, you know, there's so many gadgets out there now. I guess it can only help at some point, just so it's not giving us false readings.
I don't trust like any of the apps like at all.
Oh, me neither.
There's no way. I tried one once. I got one EVP, and then it told me I needed to subscribe for $5.99 a month. So I was like, I deleted it immediately from my phone. We just stick with digital recorders, motion cameras, the laser grid, and we'll use REM pods. You know, just is a hope, but in the spirit box, we use that quite a bit as well lately. But we find it, there's too many opportunities for a false positive, like in terms of, because of the radio chatter. Like if you get a good old fashioned EVP recorded on a digital recorder or even an old reel to reel, that holds a lot more weight.
I've gotten my best ones from those things. Absolutely.
Yeah.
William Nighthawk asks, Lon, you must think of Big Brother as an elemental being able to walk in both worlds. I think he's talking about Sasquatch. Yeah, I think they do. I mean, I think they walk in a lot of different worlds, to be honest with you.
For sure.
Yeah,
I agree
I think that's
100%.
absolutely true.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the best way to it. Like people are like, well, why haven't we found a body, and why don't we see it more often? Because it's not here all the time. Like,
exactly.
that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I think that, and then people, and you hear all the scientific malarkey about, we're only going to be able to prove it if we get a body or any physical evidence. Well, yeah, that's nice to say, but when's that going to happen? That probably will never happen. I doubt
No,
it'll happen.
I agree. It's one of those things. Even like you look at when NIDS did their big multi-year thing out at Skinwalker Ranch, right? Like you
Hmm.
had people who are highly trained scientists seeing things, but their equipment, their cameras wouldn't pick it up. They'd be like these blobs on the camera. It wouldn't look like, they would report seeing, having read the book, portals open and things walking through it. But all the camera got was suddenly this orange light appeared on this camera and it didn't pick anything up. I think this phenomena doesn't work the way that people think it should work. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Or want it to work. You're not just always going to get it with a video camera or you recreate it in a lab. It's beyond that.
yeah, I
I
agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Uh, Morigati asked, "Do you do anything to protect yourself from negative energy?"
Oh yeah, like I mean I meditate daily. I do grounding exercises several times a week. Whenever we go do an investigation, we start off by saying we're just here to communicate. We're just here to communicate. We mean you no harm. Wish no harm to come unto us. When we leave, we do that. Thank you for your time. You're not welcome to follow. Like we set the boundaries, which I find is enough, really. Especially like none of us are particularly religious people, so we don't do any kind of Lord's Prayer or anything like that. We just
Yeah,
a lot of it has to do with your will and how you approach it.
yeah. Well,
I
I'm
find.
the same way. I mean, uh, if I get a haunting or something involved with, if it gets beyond me, I'll say, yeah. If you want to go to a priest or you want to have someone do the rites, fine.
Mhm.
That's beyond me. I mean, I'm not going in that direction. As far as me and protection, I use I do use, if I'm specifically in an area, I do either use white or golden light surrounding me, surrounding my auras and such, and I do grounding. But I always, when I go into a location, there are two stones I keep with me all the time, and that's a black tourmaline and the yttrium fluorite, and I've always had those with me.
Yeah,
They
and I know
they
people
seem to
use stones
reflect a
too.
lot of things.
Yeah, yeah, and the white light thing is I do that. I make that part of my grounding, like that just is part of that, and that I find that makes tremendous difference.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just something that makes you feel better, maybe
Mhm.
that energy can kind of, have an effect.
I
I don't
think
know.
so. You can clear stuff out of your body too with it, right? Like you can. By the time I finish like the grounding with the white light, I feel so much better just as a whole. I feel more
Oh,
grounded. There's
absolutely.
nothing affecting me, and I think it has a lot. It's like what you put out into the world is what you get back, right? And you'll pick that up too. I think as well. So
Exactly.
you got to manage that.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. So Jason, this hour went by quick.
It sure did.
Why don't you tell the folks how they can get in contact with you, and if you're going to be doing anything, how they can get your books and so forth and so on.
Well, yeah, all the books, like Dying Light and the two I Want to Believe titles are available through Beyond the Fray Publishing, and they're on Amazon as well. The Paranormal Network that I'm the manager of, it's on YouTube. So you would just search out the Paranormal Network on YouTube. It's the one with the black background and the white PN, and we're also on Facebook at Paranormal Headquarters. For myself, just come find me on Facebook or Instagram at jhewlett72. Reach out. I'm always willing to talk and listen, as best I can, kind of thing. You can get inundated, but I try to
Yeah.
get back to everyone eventually.
Well,
And
that's what we do.
it is. And Canadian Paranormal Foundation is up on Facebook as well at Canadian Paranormal Foundation.
Well, Jason, it was great meeting you finally. And look, keep in contact, and maybe we'll get you back on here soon. If you're interested in joining a roundtable, that'd be great as well. So we'll keep in
Absolutely.
contact.
No, this has been great, Lon. It's been great to finally meet you and talk to you and be a part of this show. And yeah, I'd love to come back and do a roundtable. That'd be fantastic. So let's definitely keep in touch.
Okay. Well, you take care and have a great weekend.
You too, brother. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for personal report show or post on Fans of Monsters blog, feel free to forward to me at Lon Strickler fansmonsters.com. If you had an unexplained encounter sighting, feel free to contact me through the blog site. I want to again thank Jason Hewlett for joining me this evening, and thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. It's, your support is what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, share, and even comment on the show. So this coming Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, we'll be presenting another narrated edition of Personal Reports. And then again on Friday, we'll also be presenting a Hauntings and Malevolent Entities Roundtable. And my guest will be Deliverer Bill Bean, along with investigators Jason McLean and Richard Michello. And Spirit Rescuer Amy Majors is going to be tagging along as well. So, that should be a very excellent show. So make sure you tune in. So until next week, stay healthy and have a safe and enjoyable weekend. Good night.